Welcome in, friends, to Betting Pros College Football. Early look, it's a little look ahead. I'm Chris Welsh, and joining me as always is Thor Nystrom. We have got big games. We have got lots of fun stuff for you, and we have got some action. Oh yeah, it's about to all kick off. Thor, we're coming off of week 9, which saw, I believe, one of the biggest top 10 upsets in college football in God knows how long, and some betting lines that really didn't play out for the sharp betting of maybe, I don't know, a look ahead for Tennessee with Georgia. That didn't happen, so some upset there. Anything you got for us coming off of week 9 that's standing out as we are going to be doing our look ahead to week 10?
I thought it was a really fun weekend, like you're mentioning, and now you move the calendar into November and you get action, and we have some really enormous games as far as playoff implications. None bigger this weekend than Tennessee and Georgia. So it's a really fun time to be a college football fan.
Yeah, we've got a ton that we're going to be breaking through. So hold tight, and Thor is going to get you guys all set up for any of you guys that want to jump on any early lines or, get into action, which is total degenerate time because that means we get to bet on college football on a Tuesday night. On a Wednesday night, we get to sit around, be absolutely ridiculous. There's a lot of good stuff that's going on right now, full on, but we get full action football. And Thor, we got to mention it. So I'm going to run through a couple of the lines for Tuesday and Wednesday, and then anything that stands out for you for the true degens that are ready to get down with it, let us know. It's going to kick off with Ball State, Kent State, which Kent State is currently 6.5-point favorite. This is going to be, it's gorgeous. Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. God, you got to love action. You've got Ohio hosting Buffalo. Buffalo is a 3-point favorite on the road. And then Wednesday night, when you really want to get into it, you've got Northern Illinois that's hosting Central Michigan -4, and Bowling Green is hosting Western Michigan -3.5. And what I love about the Wednesday games is you have one team with 4 wins on the year. And really the Buffalo Ohio game is the only one with 2 teams that are over 500 from action. So I gave you 4 games, 4 lines. What stands out for anyone that's ready to get down with some action?
Oh, I'm getting so juiced from action. My early lean on the action games would be on Ball State. I think that the Kent State line is too inflated. So it's Kent State -6.5 live right now. My line on that game is Kent State -4.9. We've already seen these last 3 weeks, Kent State getting inflated in the market. It seems like some heavy hitters believe in Kent State, but they've been, you can fade them effectively, or you have been able to, at least to this point. I've done it a couple different times and won money. And this game, it feels like, again, there's a 1.5 or 2-point tax on the Kent State side. Kent State's run defense is an abomination. It might be the worst in the nation. If it's not, it's one of the 5 worst for sure. In this game, they have to contend with this kid, Carson Steele from Ball State, a super duper tough kid who is very hard to tackle. Kent State's one of the worst tackling teams in the nation. So as far as getting 6.5 points in that game, first game of action, I would definitely lean towards Ball State. The Buffalo, Ohio game, I'm not sure that I'm going to bet on that one. That's a fascinating one. Buffalo has looked like maybe the best team in the MAC the past couple weeks, but Ohio is definitely better than we thought they were going to be coming into the year because they have, at least for the MAC, a dominant offense. They can move the ball on anyone. It's just their defense is so bad. There's going to be a whole lot of points scored in that game. The Central Michigan, Northern Illinois game, you would need to have a good idea about status updates on one guy from each side. Lou Nichols on the Central Michigan side, who's been out for a couple weeks now. You need to know that he's going to play if you're going to invest in Central Michigan because that team stinks with him on the sideline. And then Northern Illinois with Rocky Lombardi, who's been in the lineup, out of the lineup, in the lineup, out of the lineup. Northern Illinois plays way up when Rocky Lombardi is starting and way down when he's not. So you need to know the status updates on those 2 guys. Hopefully we get them in advance. And then the other one, Bowling Green against Western Michigan. So my line in that game, it's Bowling Green -1.1. The live line is Bowling Green -3.5. But I'm absolutely not going to advocate for a play on Western Michigan. I have not bet on them once. They are one of my biggest bets in the summer was the under on Western Michigan, which is going to get there very easily. But it's a team that I have hated all fall and into the summer. And they've given no indications to change that opinion. So I understand why the books have dropped sort of like a 2-point tax on Bowling Green. But like I said, I'm not going to try to take a stake on the underdog in that game. I'll even consider going against my system and playing Bowling Green potentially.
I love that you said that because I was literally going to say, hey, we're kind of getting a hook on there for a field goal. Would you do it? You straight up answered it. Obviously, this has to be dug into more, but this won't be something that's going to be tackled later in the week because this happens on Tuesday. But it kind of sounds like both those overs in play in the Tuesday games, the Kent State Ball State with the bad tackling, and you were saying Ohio. Do you think both the over on the Kent State Ball State is 62 and 58.5 on that Ohio game? Do you think either of the overs are in play?
The overs in MAC games are always in play. It's a great American tradition betting the overs, and in particular in those games, yes, the game script is going to lean heavily in that direction for sure.
Oh man, get you guys ready and get set and get your books, call your bookie, and just get on your app because Maction is here and it's going to be fun to bet through the rest of the last couple of weeks here. We've obviously got the big games coming up here, but we have one ranked game coming up prior to Saturday when all the big action is going on. So let's jump into that one. This is going to be on Friday night. It's a Pac-12 game. Oregon State, number 24, Oregon State, now 6-2. I believe they are coming off of a bye, going up against Washington, who's 6-2. So it's going to be a big matchup here. The early line is set at 4.5, and the over is a 60. What do you think on this one prior to Saturday if you're getting in on some Friday action?
This is a good line. That's exactly where this line should be. My adjusted line on that game is Washington -4. The game being in Seattle with the arguably superior team with Washington, that maybe that explains the half a point. But like to me, this line is spot on. Unless it changes one way or the other, I will probably not be betting that game just because I think that's a sharp line.
Big avoid. All right, going into Saturday, but we want to tell you guys, friendos. If you want to track all your wagers in one place, and I know you do, because it's literally the biggest pain for me is going through and trying to manually type in bets to some of those places and really just going from book to book. Betting Pros has got you covered with their pick tracker at bettingpros.com/pick-tracking. It syncs up with your sportsbook to tally which picks hit, which miss, and gives you a live look at what the public is doing so you can use real-time tracking to determine which plays to make and which to fade. Get on the leaderboard and quickly become a sharp by using the free advice we have to offer at bettingpros.com/pick-tracking. Do it. Make your life easier. Spend more time betting.
We have some good tools, man. We have some really good tools, like some of that stuff. It's really good. I do have to say, yeah.
I touted it while doing the baseball podcast this whole year. People can find me over. I did it all season with Joe Pizzapia. One of my favorite tools on Betting Pros was the prop cheat sheet when it would generate all the props. Even if you didn't, and this is just a plug for them, even if you didn't necessarily love what the algorithm spit out, what I loved about it is it would put players on my radar immediately that I could go and I could research further instead of doing just a blanket look across the board. And that is just one of the many tools they do, obviously, for football and baseball. But go and check them out. Betting Pros, and the pick tracking is awesome. Saturday, let's go. Biggest game of the year. 8-0 versus 8-0, number 1 versus number 2. There was no look-ahead situation for Tennessee last week as Tennessee was up against Kentucky. Everyone was kind of playing that card here. Tennessee won 44-6. That over didn't hit, by the way, which kill me here. That one was brutal. Georgia beat up on Florida 42-20. So this is two powerhouses. Thor, where are we going with number 1 versus number 2? I believe the early line is set at 9 on Georgia right now at home. So what do you got? My
line on that game is Georgia -8 in my system. I had another good week last week. I've had like 4 straight good ones. My biggest mistake by far was back in Kentucky, which was one of those ones where like in the late first quarter, you're already doing a ticket bonfire, knowing that there's no chance that you're going to cover that game. Tennessee, man, they have overcome everything and they keep exceeding expectations. It doesn't matter the opponent because they've beaten a variety of different teams that play in a variety of different ways. Doesn't seem to matter what the situational spot is either. They overcome all of it. And now they've gotten back to full strength with Cedric Tillman getting back. That's particularly big in this matchup when you're going up against this nasty defense of Georgia's. I think they match up okay with Georgia, Tennessee. Like the strength of the Tennessee defense by far, it's their defensive front. They're really good against the run, And in the last game, the weakness of the Vols defense is their secondary. But in the last game against Levis, Tennessee was sending pressure that was getting there and spooking Levis. Can they get pressure on Stetson Bennett similarly, where Stetson Bennett's not just back there and he can fish for plays downfield when that happens? Because if Tennessee is able to slow down Georgia's running game, Stetson Bennett is going to have to make throws in this game for Georgia to win. I would definitely not be laying the points with Georgia here. I would lean Tennessee for sure early in the week. And it was funny. I was texting your buddy Bogman on Saturday about the Tennessee-Kentucky game because we were on opposite sides of that one. And I was very wrong. And I told Bogman that it was a cheap lesson learned, trying to fade Tennessee for the last time, because I told him I'm not fading them the rest of the year. Like I learned my lesson trying to step on the train tracks. I'd been on Tennessee earlier in the season, like against Alabama, stuff like that. But I tried to stick my hand in the cookie jar and it got chopped off. So I'm not going to be fading Tennessee again. Lesson learned on that. And in this game, I would lean the Tennessee direction.
Yeah, and one of the worst things about this too, getting back to that over, because I know that was a play you two both completely agreed on, even though you were on opposite sides, was all that happened in this one was Kentucky just had nothing. Kentucky couldn't keep up their end of the bargain. Tennessee scoring 40 whatever points, they just couldn't keep up with that over. So it's kind of a big line. Do you think we're going to come down on the line in the week? Do you think we're going to get like Georgia closer to a touchdown? Do you what type of movement do you think is going to happen over the next couple of days for this game? Because I think there's going to be so much massive interest because of number 1 and number 2 rank, but finding where you want to bet it's going to get tricky, especially if that number comes down at all.
I think that's really hard to say. And not just for me, where the books put that line, I don't think they know where the money's coming in. They know they're going to get an enormous handle on this game, but they put this line in a dead zone where the market will get to dictate, setting it at 9. The market will get to dictate does it get up to 10 or is it going to move back down towards 7? But the books were not willing to sort of plant their flag on one side or the other of that. They're leaving this thing in that hazy sort of dead zone and letting the market decide. I honestly don't know, right? Like, I mean, just in a vacuum, you would think that Georgia would be the more public team just from name value going into the past. But Tennessee, it's been hard to buy a Tennessee ticket and not cash this year. So like at some point there's going to be a critical mass, sort of like with the 2019 LSU team, where people just started to bet on them towards the end of the year. Tennessee is about to hit that threshold as well. So it's really hard for me to predict exactly where the sharps are going to be in this game and where the public is going to be.
Do you think just one last thing, do you think the line as far as the over 65.5 is what it's currently looking like? Do you think that's right on money? You think it's a little high for number 1, number 2? You think that's going to be play? I mean, obviously you're going to talk about this a little bit later in the week, but just at a first eyes glance, you think that's going to be playable?
It does feel a little bit high to me on first glance. Yeah, for sure. Because again, like Tennessee's defense can address what Georgia's offense would prefer to do. Yeah. And then Georgia's defense is so good. But then again, Tennessee's been lighting up everybody. Like Kentucky has an awesome defense. Kentucky has a top 10 SP plus defense, and they can defend both the run and the pass, except for on Saturday when they were playing the Vols.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known it last week. 100%.
Exactly.
Going to be an awesome game to watch. We got another one. Number 6 Alabama, 7-1, coming up against number 15 LSU, who's 6-2. Both teams coming off of a bye. This on a normal week would probably be a big powerhouse game, as a must tune in. Obviously, Georgia, Tennessee taking that. But what are you thinking about this bad boy?
I'm a little surprised with how high that line opened in Alabama's favor. Being a 13-point favorite on the road at night in Baton Rouge with an LSU team that has been playing a lot better in recent weeks, that's a bridge too far for me at the 13 number. My adjusted line in that game is Alabama minus 10.7. I feel like the fair line would be closer to 10 as opposed to the 13. This one will be interesting. You were talking about where's the money going to go on Tennessee, Georgia. This one's really interesting too, because I'm going to be sniffing around LSU hard this week. Do you place, if you're interested in LSU, do you place your bet early and then, like guarding yourself against it falling into the 12s, or do you wait on the idea that this thing could get up to 13.5 or even 14. I'm going to be looking around at the market indicators early in the week to try to sort of gauge where that's going. But I definitely prefer LSU.
You think this has to be like them coming off of a bye situation, why they're getting that? I kind of agree with you. I feel like this would be sitting around more like a 10, but maybe this is them coming off of a bye, having a week to recoup themselves, obviously having just kind of a reestablish moment of having the loss this year. And even though it's not a normal number 15 LSU team, even though they're going into home, I feel like this is a giving the extra benefit, maybe even 2 or 3 points because they're coming off of a bye.
Yeah, I would say just name value, because you never see the Alabama game where you don't have to pay the tax on the Alabama side. And that hasn't changed this year, despite, for instance, them losing to Tennessee, a loss that looks way better in hindsight. Bryce Young, first of all, was compromised in that game. And now we know, Tennessee looks like sort of a Leviathan. So, with that, the market has not lost any faith in Alabama. That's sort of what I think that is. But your point's well taken as well on the bye, which hopefully gave Bryce Young another week to get healthy. And hopefully he's going to be the healthiest he's been since pre-injury in this game. And we'll see how he does. But LSU can defend the pass, so it's going to be interesting.
So how about we go from these two awesome, great matchups, 1 versus 2, big, great records, division battles. And then we go and we look at number 2 Ohio State, who's 8-0, going up against 1-7 Northwestern. Reason we bring it up, obviously, is because Ohio State, and we've got a huge line on it. It's early set 38 points for Ohio State. What do you think? Where's the bet on this one? Can you bet? Is Ohio State going to put up 40 plus?
In terms of the margin, for sure, maybe. In terms of just road score, they're going to put up way more than that. Northwestern's defense is so bad that last week they gave up how many points to Iowa? It was the first Iowa game I was watching where it was like, oh, Iowa can move the ball. And the announcers the whole game were like, oh, this is sort of a renaissance of Iowa offensive football. If they can just keep playing this way the rest of the year, Iowa might not lose again. And I was thinking, like, yeah, if only they could play Northwestern every game for the rest of the year. And Northwestern's offense stinks too. Like, they just don't have any talent. They try to run tempo and get their yardage that way by gassing defenders and catching you off guard, stuff like that. But it don't work. It's all just smoke and mirrors BS that any decent defense could just wipe off the board. They pose zero threat to Iowa's defense. Ohio State's defense isn't quite as good as Iowa's, but it's pretty close now that it's ticked up with Jim Knowles there. I definitely would not be taking the points with Northwestern at home, even though it is an enormous line. My system would suggest it's not as inflated as a lot of these games tend to be. My system has Ohio State minus 36.6. So this feels in line to me. I'm not interested in leg 38 on the road with Ohio State either, I don't think. So it's probably going to be a stay away for me. But yeah, I'm not interested in trying to back Northwestern in this spot.
Also, 62.5 is the early over-under. Again, that kind of feels like one Ohio State would probably have to carry most of that. So there might be a stay away potentially across the board. And want to remind everybody that you guys have a chance to win a signed T. Higgins Cincinnati Bengals helmet. How much better did that get? Unfortunately, with Jamar Chase out, the number 1. And this is courtesy of our friends over at Pristine Auction. All you got to do is you got to subscribe to the Betting Pros YouTube channel right now. If you're watching the video, it's like right below us. It's really easy. Then go and comment below this video. You can say how handsome Thor and I are, whatever you want to say, whatever smart, awesome thing you want to say. And that's it. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the channel. So make sure you turn on those notifications so you guys can be alerted when new episodes are up, and you can claim your prize. T. Higgins Cincinnati Bengals autograph helmet. Pretty awesome. We gave a focus into TCU last week. TCU coming off of a 41-31 victory to West Virginia, number 7 team in the nation. They're going up against Texas Tech. This is a Big 12 battle. TCU 8-0, Texas Tech 4-4. The early line, though, and this I don't know if this smells or is fishy at all. TCU by 10 at home, 8-0 versus 4-4. Maybe you would think there'd be a little bit more of a difference between that spread, maybe a little bit higher. But what do you think, Thor? TCU 10 points.
I agree. It feels a little bit light to me. My system has TCU minus 11.3. And coming off the game Texas Tech just had, I watched that game when they were playing Baylor. They looked bad. And it was in a spot that was sort of a spotlight spot for Texas Tech. That day, they had they'd either retired Mahomes' number or put him into their Hall of Fame. But it was like Pat Mahomes Day in Lubbock. And Joey McGuire was the longtime Baylor assistant that recruited most of the kids on the other roster. And they could not help from getting absolutely blasted. And then at the end of the game, Texas Tech started making some weird decisions. Like they were getting blown out, and they decided to put Tyler Shuck into the game, the kid who broke his collarbone in September. We hadn't seen him since. And now they're sort of on the wrong end of an avalanche, and they decide to throw Shuck in cold off the bench when he hasn't played in months. His very first throw was a pick six. I think his second play, he got sacked. There were several more sacks to come. He looked really bad. You're definitely going to see, Baron Morton is going to be the guy going forward. They soured on Donovan Smith earlier in the year, and Shuck, I don't know if he just doesn't have it or if he's just not healthy or what it is. But Baron Morton has a decent arm, and certainly they're going to try to attack TCU through the air. But TCU, it's another one of these teams like Tennessee that has overcome circumstances over and over and over again and continues to cash tickets. I mean, like these last 3, 4, 5 weeks, every single time there's been something sort of fortunate that happened to TCU that allowed them to cash the ticket. Last week, the sharp thread that I'm in, people were going nuts with the last play from TCU West Virginia. I don't know if you saw it at the very end. TCU was only leading by 3 points, and they were at like the West Virginia's like 30-yard line. Yeah. And they decided to go for it on fourth down. West Virginia jumps off sides. And so Max Dugan was like, screw it, I'm just going to chuck it deep. And they got a touchdown pass on that play to cover with 25 seconds left or whatever to cover the 7.5. Prior to that, it had been quarterback injuries to the opponent in every single game, like going back like the last 3 or 4 before that. You keep expecting TCU's sort of circumstantial luck to run out. But in this case, I think the value is on TCU in the pregame, and I think they match up decently well here.
Yeah, I think I saw the 2 most popular dogs I saw for last Saturday were Kentucky and West Virginia. And I saw a lot of people bemoaning the brutal loss they got to TCU. So that was brutal. I also want to point out for this week, as far as ranked games go, because there might be something higher that I'm not looking at, the highest over-under is set for this game at 71 with a ranked opponent. Does that feel a little too high? I know, again, it's early. You probably hit on it later in the week, but 71 points for Texas Tech TCU. Do you think that's at all going to be playable?
Not this one. I think the book is like, how high can we set this thing? My adjusted total on that game, my systems, it's the highest of the week. 78 points is what my system set for the over-under of that game. There will be points.
There will be points. There will be blood. There will be points. All right, let's go over to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, number 18, 6-2, going up against Kansas, 5-3. What do we got on this game?
So my adjusted line on that game is Oklahoma State minus 5.8. Adjusted total on that game, another very high one. I have my system's adjusted total on that game is 75. So we're gonna have some shootouts in the Big 12 this week. With this line, it's sort of curious, right? That it's only Oklahoma State minus 3.5. It's kind of interesting. Maybe a part of that is just sort of the market in the immediate aftermath of Oklahoma State just getting annihilated by Kansas State. And Kansas State's backup quarterback and Will Howard. I mean, that was like right from the jump. It was like that meme of like, stop it, he's already dead, sort of a thing. They just kept pouring it on. So, maybe that has something to do with it. Kansas was on, Oklahoma State had the awful week. Kansas was on bye, and Kansas badly needed it because the last 3 games consecutively before that, Kansas had suffered a major injury in every single one. One of the things I'm going to be monitoring for in this game is you go back to one of the 3 major injuries I was just referring to. I think the first one, Jalen Daniels, when he got knocked out against, funny enough, ironically enough, TCU, which started the run of TCU knocking out the opposing quarterbacks. But the week after that, there was the report that Jalen Daniels had suffered this this severe shoulder separation, and he was going to be out for the year. That's what a Lawrence Journal-World beat reporter reported. Daniels comes out, quote tweets that guy, and was basically like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then the next weekend, Pete Thamel of ESPN, generally very reliable, he reported that Daniels is not out for the season and that the earliest possible game he could return is this one. So I don't know. There's a lot of different smoke as far as the information coming out, like, you know, where the reporters are saying, and then Daniels responding to it, whatever. But if Kansas gets Daniels back in this game, that certainly ticks them up. He probably worth a couple points on the spread against Jason Bean. So that's going to be something to watch out for. But yeah, it's interesting where this line opened.
It's a little fishy. Yeah, it's a little fishy. I mean, yeah, like you said, like you got to account for the absolute blowout that they took, but still, you know, a ranked team like this coming off of that, it seems a little fishy. If Daniels is back, by the way, are you going to jump immediately if they release any props, rushing yard props on Daniels? Are you going to jump on it this week?
I might, yeah, for sure. And by the way, I think this is another thing. You know, it's not just sort of like the perceptual thing. This is also a very good spot for Kansas, I would say. You know, both Oklahoma State coming off of what they came off of, but Oklahoma State also took their second loss. And not only that, their second loss in the Big 12. And not only that, their second loss of their last 3 games. This is a big time deflation spot for them. I mean, earlier in October, earlier in the month, this was a team that was like, maybe we can run the table. Maybe we can win the Big 12. Maybe we can even go to the college football playoff. That stuff is all off the board now. I mean, even like the sort of long shot of like, you know, maybe we can be discussed as a one-loss team. That's now gone as well. So their dreams for this season are now over on the Oklahoma State side. Now you travel to Lawrence to play Kansas, a team coming off of the bye. And one interesting thing, and this is the time of the year where we start to talk about this stuff, Kansas has been stuck on 5 wins since their 5th game. They started out 5-0. They've had some close losses since they lost by 7 to TCU in the game where Daniels got injured. They lost by 10 to Oklahoma in the game where their cornerback 1 got injured, and they lost by 10 to the Baylor. Right? They've been close to getting that 6th win. They have not quite pushed that rock all the way up the hill. This program has not been to a bowl game since I think the year I was out of undergrad, which I'm not even going to say what year that was because I don't want to date myself like that. But that would be, for a lot of programs, it's not that's not as big of a deal. For the Kansas program, that is enormous. The idea of getting to 6 wins, there's going to be a big emphasis on this game because Kansas, their schedule going forward, it's the hardest in the nation. And I mean, it basically has been since post the 5th game. The schedule after that just became an absolute bear. So any game where they have a potential to win it is going to get enormous emphasis going for this 6th win. It's a good situational spot for Kansas. Maybe that explains some of the line stuff too.
Always love the breakdowns. And if you do as well, and if you're looking for free picks, player props, and breakdowns on almost every game that college football has to offer, it's not just here because this is the early look. When you get the real look, join Thor Nystrom and Mike Farrell on Game Day Live, presented by DraftKings, each and every Saturday starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you've got questions you need answered, they got you. Our team of experts will be live for 90 minutes of nonstop action leading up to kickoff to answer all those questions. So join the live stream and toss your questions in the chat. Game Day Live, presented by DraftKings, Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Make sure to do it, friends. A couple more games here we'll take a look at. Number 5, Clemson. 8-0. He's got Notre Dame. So at least we've got a little bit of a matchup here. Currently, the early line looks like Clemson 3.5. Again, it's fishy. 3.5 points on the road, sure, but it's the number 5 team in the nation going up against Notre Dame. Over-under is under 50 at 47.5. Why is this fishy? Why do we have a fishy Clemson line?
Yeah, I agree with you. It is fishy. My line on that is Clemson minus 4.1. It's certainly noteworthy and it's certainly interesting. I mean, we're sort of kismet where Clemson really struggled to beat Syracuse and they needed to yank their quarterback in that game to do it. And then, of course, they were on bye last week. But then we saw the opponent this week, Notre Dame, play Syracuse last week, did not have the same kind of problems. So maybe like what do you call it? The transference property of like the A plus B. Maybe that's informing some of the confidence in Notre Dame, like early on in the week in the marketplace. But like you wonder how Notre Dame is going to do against Notre Dame's offense is going to do against this Clemson defense, because Clemson's front seven is so nasty. And Notre Dame they have a dearth of playmakers. It's basically run the ball and then try to force the ball to Michael Mayer. Clemson at least has the athletes that some of these other teams don't in terms of trying to address Michael Mayer. And the rest of the offense is vanilla on the Notre Dame side. But then on the Clemson side, you also have questions about their offense. Last time we saw them, that was the game against Syracuse where they benched DJU and they brought in Klubnik. They won that game after they did that. Klubnik didn't look great. And of course, right after the game, Dabo came out and was like, DJU is going to be our starter. But that's something interesting to watch and to think about as well, because if nothing else, we now know definitively that DJU's leash is very, very short. And so if DJU comes into this game and is struggling in the first half, Notre Dame pulls ahead, you might see the hook in that one. Maybe that is some of the pessimism too in the marketplace for Clemson right now. Where the line is, the margins are pretty close for me. But if that line comes down and if this thing gets certainly if it got under a field goal, I would absolutely be laying on Clemson. That's what I'm going to be crossing my fingers for in the next couple of days as I handicap that game. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
So in a world that not all things are created equal, in that, number 5, 8-0, Clemson versus Notre Dame is 5-3. Number 4, Michigan, who's 8-0, is coming up against Rutgers, and there is no fishiness because Michigan is a 25.5-point favorite. So no questions on offense. Rutgers obviously not the same team that Notre Dame is, but you think there's going to be a bet here for number 4 Michigan, who's been on a roll?
So my line in that game is Michigan minus 25.4. My system's total on it is 55. The question for people considering Rutgers in that thing is, can you sort of deduce a path for Rutgers to score any points in this game, right? Like, because they're going to have to get to at least 10, certainly, maybe to 14 to cover this thing. I actually like the Rutgers defense. Like they play tough. They play assignment sound. They tackle. But the offense is just so putrid. It's just so bad. Last week they were in Minneapolis, where I'm coming to you live from, and they could do absolutely nothing against the Gophers, a Gopher team that had lost, I believe, 3 straight games heading into that game. The Gophers had no problem shutting the lights out on the Rutgers offense. So this handicap entirely comes down to, can you perceive Rutgers scoring, like, again, getting into the double digits against the Michigan team? That would make them potentially viable against the spread. It's hard for me to trust them to do that, especially when I know the quality of Michigan's defense.
Did you have the over or your early line at 55?
55.
It's 45.5. Just pointing out that for the public. So 45.5 posted. That's if you want to talk about a value versus Thor's line, that's a 10-point value right there on the over under. Is that something you think you're going to feel comfortable playing the over under based on what you're seeing?
So you said it's 44 live.
I say 45.5.
45.5. Yeah, that I would be more interested in that than the side. Because we don't need as much help for the Rutgers offense. As far as where that number is, I'm confident that Michigan is going to put up points in this game. Maybe not an offensive bonanza, but they've scored on every defense that they played this year. I'll take you back to the Penn State game. Penn State's got a pretty decent defense. Michigan carved them up. And a team that other people, there's been teams that have really struggled to run the ball in Penn State. Michigan did not whatsoever. Yes, I was saying this stuff. I respect Rutgers defense. I absolutely do. But Michigan's certainly going to put up points on them. And where that line or where that total is, again, we don't need the help from Rutgers' offense that we potentially do when considering like the side bet of the game. So yeah, I would definitely lean towards the over in that.
2 more games we'll take a look at. Number 13, Kansas State, who's now 6-2, is going to be hosting Texas, who is 5-3 in a Big 12 matchup. You've got Texas on the road as a 2.5-point favorite versus a top 15 team at home. So again, is this fishy or is this just right?
Did you say it's 2.5 now?
I see minus 2.5 Texas early.
Oh, holy crap. So I just looked at a different site. I'm now seeing on that site it listed at Texas minus 1.5. That's fascinating. And the reason why is in the openers, when those drop yesterday afternoon on Sunday afternoon, Texas dropped at -4 or even -4.5. That is really interesting that the money is coming in on Kansas State. It's really interesting, and I'm also super disappointed because I missed my window to bet on Kansas State at over a field goal. I like Kansas State in this game. This fascinating early week movement, I think it's right. I think Kansas State matches up really well in this game. Not only the way that they play, but the way their team is constituted, they slow down the game. Like their offense, it allows their defense to get some rest, which in a game like this is big. And then they have the really solid defense, which can address both the pass and the run game. And this Texas team, they can be multiple, of course, because they now have the quarterback, and then you go along with Bijan, whatever. A defense that's going to slow them at all. They need to be able to defend the both of them. Kansas State can. And then we were talking about some of the home field advantages earlier in the show. For instance, LSU in Baton Rouge at night, or a couple of those different ones. Kansas State and the Little Apple is an enormous home field advantage. This is going to be a really tough environment for Texas, and in particular, their first-year starting quarterback Quinn Ewers, who's now making his fifth start of his career, or whatever. Now he's got to go into Kansas State. This is a tough one. My line on this game in my system is. It's basically a pick 'em. I have Texas minus 0.3 points. So my system says this game is a coin flip. I actually slightly prefer Kansas State. And I totally agree with where the line movement has gone early on.
Final matchup that we're going to take a preview on is in the ACC. Two ranked teams, number 20 versus number 21. Wake Forest, number 20, who's 6-2 versus 6-2 NC State, who is 21st in the nation. Early line looks like Wake -4. Your over is set around 54. What do we got on this bad boy?
Yeah, I think this line is too short. So you have two different things going on here where last week, I've been talking about some of these teams that looked bad last week. There wasn't many teams that look worse than Wake Forest. And the third quarter that Sam Hartman had in that game was one of the worst singular quarters I have ever seen, like a college quarterback play. And it was crazy that the quarterback was that good. But there was every time you looked up, it was a pick six. It was just wild how quickly that one got away from Wake Forest. But their awful showing in that game where they lose, was it 48-21 to Louisville? That awful showing, it's going to give you a little bit of line value turning around to this game, particularly when you know the context that NC State is way down after they lost Devin Leary, their starting quarterback, for the rest of the season. NC State has not been the same team since Devin Leary went out. This line, to me, it should be a little bit higher, knowing those sorts of things. But I also get that the market probably doesn't want to bet on Wake Forest right now after what it just saw against Louisville. But Sam Hartman ain't going to play that bad again.
Friends, you can find him on Twitter at ThorKU. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel right here over on Betting Pros and the podcast, because it's not just about the look ahead. You're going to get all the week's action as Thor has got more content coming for you the rest of the week, so you guys can get set. As always, I'm jacked up. I'm ready to bet some action. I'm not going to even wait till Friday or Saturday. I'm already ready for Tuesday. I'm ready for some overs. I'm going to do it. Hopefully you will as well. Make sure to tweet at everybody. Let us know what you're betting from action, because Thor's going to be jacked up and is a must follow on Twitter, especially when college football is going down. It's the early look right here on Betting Pros. That's Thor. I'm Welsh. I will talk to you guys next week, but Thor will be here later in the week. Goodbye, friends.